Yeah, it's me, Frobisher. What are you expecting? A penguin in a trench coat? Now, I don't have the budget for those effects, so you're gonna have to start with me in my human form. You wanna hear a review on my 2 stories? Well, all I can say for the guy is, good luck. You're gonna need it, mate. Hello ladies and gentlemen, Nick here and welcome to this special Big Finish review where I'll be taking a look at the Big Finish audio stories featuring the character Frobisher. A little bit of context here. Frobisher was originally a comic strip companion who featured alongside the 6th Doctor and usually also Perry. And Frobisher was a noir-sounding detective from the planet of talking animals. And in this case, he was a penguin most of the time. And they would go on quite a few adventures. And he even makes it into audio with 2 Big Finish stories written by Dalek writer Rob Shearman, who wrote a total of 6 Big Finish stories. The other ones include The Chimes of Midnight, which Matt's reviewed. One of the Unbound stories. I can't remember its title, but it'll be here. Below. He wrote Scherzo, which is another main range story, along with one of the ones I'm reviewing today, and Chimes of Midnight. And the 2 I'm reviewing today are The Holy Terror and The Maltese Penguin, which is a bonus. That latter one, Jubilee, is the other story Rob Shearman has written. So he's written 2 8th Doctor and 2 6th Doctor monthly ranges, plus a monthly bonus release. Also with 6, and a Unbound with an Unbound Doctor. And Jubilee was the story that more or less inspired Dalek. Dalek is loosely based on an idea from that story. So anyway, but we're not here to talk about Jubilee. I haven't heard that one yet. Boo hiss, I suppose. Not heard Scherzo or the Unbound one yet, but I've heard the other 3. And since one of them's already been reviewed, and in a pretty perfect review, by the way, Matt, I'll be taking a look at the other 2 stories. The Holy Terror, which I don't have because it's out of stock and I couldn't get it on eBay, and the Maltese Penguin, which is still in stock and pretty easy to find on eBay as well. In fact, I think if you were to look on eBay, it's probably more expensive than the actual Big Finish websites. And if you looked on collection sets with monthlies 1 to 50, 1 to 100, including the Holy Terror, the Maltese Penguin, this will probably be the last one that will be left over, that people are scrambling to get all of these out of print CDs, and some of the ones that are still in print in the case of the 51 to 100s. But people scrambling to get all of these CDs that are out of print now, and some of the ones that are still in print in some cases if they're cheaper. And you'll probably get this one, certainly with the 1 to 50s. This will probably be the last one left over if it's included. So, but like I said, I got this one from the website, so probably cheaper anyway there, and it's same price on download, so may as well get the CD. Yeah, I just have to find a Holy Terror CD when I get more money and when there's one available again. Anyway, so the plot of the Holy Terror is the 6th Doctor and Frobisher arrive on a planet with traditions that they express with the utmost urgency that it's all tradition. So they're very insistent on it, despite what the Doctor or Frobisher would think, and despite some of the changes other people might want to make. So what's happening is that their ruler, King Pepin VI, who's supposed to be an immortal god, turns out he wasn't immortal, therefore he was a false god, and now his son Pepin VII is the king. The king is supposed to have 2 sons, a legitimate one and an illegitimate one, with the father of the illegitimate one, of course, being executed, and this illegitimate son being the evil brother. And it's usually the good brother who it's brothers by the sound of it, no sisters. I wonder what happened if they did have any girls who were not older than, and there was either no brothers or the brothers were younger. I mean, I'm sure they'd be okay with younger sisters being there, but I wonder what the society would say if it was just girls, or if there were girls older than the brothers. They might throw the brothers to the front if it's the case of the latter. At least for viewing. They might even have the illegitimate sisters, or girls, daughters, so forth. In that case, I'm not sure. It's mainly focused on the sons, though. Childerak is the illegitimate evil brother, and he married someone, and he had a child with her and then killed her, obviously. And he's growing this boy to take his place as the ruler afterward, to take over, and he's going to take over before he's trying to become king before his son does. And Pepin the seventh, he's kind of a weak child, to be honest. He's pretty weak and not very. He doesn't really have much of a gut to be king, so he pretty much admits that he doesn't feel like a god. Well, I say, well, king, yes, he can, but god, he doesn't feel like a god. Even when after the ceremony, he doesn't feel like a god, which means, of course, he and his wife have to be executed because they're not the real gods. Thankfully, at this time, Frobisher and the Doctor arrive, and Frobisher is hailed as the new god, and he eventually spares Pepin and makes him his second in command. High priest, who usually teams up with the baddie, the evil son, to overthrow the king and eventually get executed in the end. Yeah, it's this tradition stuff. It's like everything is playing out. It's everyone's on repeat, apart from a few occasions where some things seems to change, like Pepin saying that he doesn't feel like a god. Some things may be all different, some cases, but by the sounds of it, the structure is king dies. He's supposed to be an immortal god, but they think, oh no, because he's died, he was a false god. We've now got to arrest and interrogate everybody who worshipped him, and if they don't swear allegiance to the new king, they're going to die, and we've got to execute the queen as well, because wife of the false god. And the son, the legitimate son, has to take over and become the new immortal king. However, his illegitimate brother and the high priest have to try and revolt against him, and eventually they get defeated and executed, of course. And the king has to marry the prettiest girl in the kingdom and make her his queen, and eventually they have a son, well, two sons actually, and the guy who had the illegitimate son with the queen is executed for good measure, and then they grow up, and then the whole process starts all over again. Once this king dies, he's proclaimed false god, and we start all over again. Similarly, the high priest will also have his own children in there. And in this case, the one that we meet in this story doesn't, as far as I'm aware. We also have the scribe who documents everything, and he's supposed to have a son each time. However, with the appearance of the Doctor and Frobisher and Pepin being a little bit different to previous kings, things are a little different this time round, as the Doctor seeks to work out the mystery behind everything and trying to work out what's going on, and Frobisher is trying to basically rule the kingdom with a great statue. It's a really good statue. It's on the cover, and he's trying to keep Pepin alive as his high priest. Pepin's wife isn't exactly happy about what he did at the stand, so she decides to join the revolt against him, and she ends up being the first one to die after Childerak reveals his son, who is kind of this monster murdering creature. We've also got Childerak's servant, who, again, is father to son passed down thing. He's tending to the boy. And actually, no, he might be the first one to die. Then it's the wife. It's one of those two, and then the other. But yeah, about halfway through the story, we're introduced to this little boy, and about towards the end of part 3, start of part 4, he starts going on a murder spree, and the Doctor realises that he's actually the scribe, but younger. And he realises that the scribe it eventually turns out the scribe was actually a criminal who murdered his son in a fit of insanity. And now he's created this fantasy universe, which is basically on repeat until eventually the creature that's been invented in this universe that looks like his son, or a younger version of him, and it destroys everything, and he's got to start it all over again, with just him left. However, in this case, he decides to face up to it and lets the creature kill him, and so the whole universe is wiped out, and it's just a blank void with just the Doctor, Frobisher, and the TARDIS left. So yeah, that's basically the story, and it's a pretty interesting story. It's a pretty gruesome one. I really liked it on the first viewing, but when I re-listened to it, because I listened to it twice, I listened to it once after getting it, and then when I was going through some of the stories in all, quite a few stories in order, I listened to this one again, and it was really great on a re-listen. So I do recommend checking this out at least twice to get some of these versions of the story, get some of the stuff that's mentioned, and understand it by the time you get to the end. So after a second listening, you would understand a bit more of the stuff that's going on. Admittedly, there are some kind of teeth-gritting moments, and you're like, ugh, with some of the attitudes, with some of the traditional moments. But overall, it works pretty well. I will say this, part 1 is about 34 minutes, which is longer than your usual episode of a Big Finish story. It does go on a bit longer than maybe it needs to. I think it could have been a little bit shorter. I think it's 34 minutes. It might be 39. 34, 39 minutes, which is usually these episodes are around the 25 to 30 minute mark. Then again, there are some of their stories some stories have episodes that are only about 20 to 21 minutes. So those ones obviously didn't have as much material. So I would say generally the stories are around 25 to 30 minutes per episode for a general release, unless they decide to go for 2-part stories, which are usually a bit longer. So Holy Terror is just really great. It's got a lot of really great characters. The acting is also really brilliant, and I just think it's a really great story, and it's very gruesome, very violent in the last episode, very bloody. Ooh, it's nasty. Oh, you'll have such a good time with it. Yeah, especially you sadists out there. Ooh, lovely jubbly. Yeah, and it's got some really good character development throughout the story. It's just, yeah, it's really great. So, yeah, I did used to give it a 9, but after that time of recording this, I recently rewatched Inferno, and I thought, despite some bits of that story kind of gritting my teeth because it's a bit annoying for me personally, objectively, it was amazing, and I gave that one a 10. So, you know what? The Holy Terror, I'm going to give it a 10 out of 10. Objectively, it's pretty much perfect. Subjectively, there are some bits that annoy me a little bit, but I can put those aside, and some bits are important to the plot, so it makes a lot of sense. So, the Holy Terror wins out on a very, very high score. But now we come to a story that I consider slightly better than that story, and had previously had a 10 out of 10 score beforehand. The Maltese Penguin. Right, so the Holy Terror was main range story number 14, and the second to last story from the year 2000, and preceding another Big Finish story that I've reviewed, The Mutant Phase, which was number 15, as I mentioned in that review, so please check that review out. I don't know if that's as perfect as Matt's Chimes of Midnight one. Oh well. Was that the next story Rob Sherman wrote, Chimes of Midnight? I think it must have been. Jubilee then came after that, and Scherzo after that. And this story came in between this Chimes of Midnight and Scherzo. I'm not sure about the Unbound story. I think that was for the 40th anniversary, which would have been just before Scherzo. But yeah, Maltese Penguin. This is a great release. It's release number 33.5. It's a bonus range story. But it's being released after story 33, which is the last of the second lot of 8th Doctor ones, and just before Spare Parts. Can't remember that 8th Doctor story. I think that was a one-worded title story as well. Insert below here. And then Spare Parts was number 34. That was a good one. That was a very good one. Matt, maybe you should review Spare Parts. And the bonus range would pick up a little bit later on with Real Time, I think later in 2002. So this one came out in 2002 as well. And yeah, it's really great. The plot of this one is much simpler to follow, and it's a shorter story of only 75 minutes as opposed to Holy Terror, which was between 2 and 2.25 hours. This time around, we're following Frobisher after he's left the TARDIS. He's gone back to his planet of talking animals. He's now a private back as a private detective. in a very noir setting, and he's taken the case by a very pretty young lady called Alicia Mulholland to find her fiance, Arthur Greengrass. And he follows him to another comic strip character from the Docu magazine, Josiah W. Dogbolter, who Big Finish fans may remember. He was back in one of last year's 7th Doctor main range audios. I think it was the August one. No, August was Red Planets. The September one or the October one. Magnificent, played by Toby Longworth, who I previously praised as the voice of Beat the Meep in the Ratings War. He's not back as Beat the Meep in the comic strips audios that have recently been released, sadly. He is in those audios, just not as Beat the Meep. But yeah, so we got Toby Longworth back again in this audio, and he's a regular, semi-regular at least in these audios. He does a good job. But I think after Beep, Dogbolter is my favourite of his performances, of the ones I've heard from him, at least in the earlier years at least. I haven't got very far beyond the mid-2000s due to pricing. But anyway, yeah, Dogbolter is a really good character, a really great character, and Frobisher's investigations eventually lead to him, and he eventually has to stop Dogbolter. Well, I say stop Dogbolter. Dogbolter's trying to work out that he knows Greengrass has made something, and he wants Frobisher to find out what. But Frobisher refuses services, and so he tries to get him killed. But it ends up Frobisher is trying to find out what happened anyway. And eventually the twist is really good. This story has an amazing resolution at the end, and all is revealed. It's revealed that Arthur Greengrass was actually Alicia Mulholland, who is another metamorphosis, like Frobisher, a animal who can shapeshift from the planet of talking animals, and she was able to shapeshift into Arthur Greengrass and create a something, as Mr. Dogbolter called it, and it turns out to be a joke to make Dogbolter's workers not just sit on the computers and pressing buttons, but eventually they create something which is something Mr. Dogbolter's scared of, and it could disrupt his factory systems, and it turns out it's something for people to laugh at. And eventually after laughing at the joke, they get talking, and then maybe coming up with more inventions of their own. Dogbolter's business would be ruined. She also transforms into a puddle of blood for Frobisher to find on a crime scene, and it turns out that she's actually another penguin, Frobisher's ex-wife. In fact, it turns out that Frobisher chose the penguin form because his ex-wife used to love it so much. So it's a nice little reunion. I don't really have that much knowledge on Frobisher lore outside of these audios, and only from the stuff that's been mentioned in this story in the Holy Terror about his love life. I'm sure that's coming from the comics as well, and I think Rob Shearman's taken those elements and has made a resolution to the story, and it works super well with this story. And what's even better is the Doctor pops up a couple of times in the story. He pops up 3 times, one at the beginning to talk to Frobisher, one at the end after Frobisher narrowly avoids death, and then towards the end he inadvertently saves Frobisher, and he has to admit that he's lonely without him. Eventually Frobisher then goes back to join the Doctor to travel the universe, whilst his ex-wife Francine goes off to hunt down Dogbolter and eventually bring him to justice. More comic strip stories and further audio adventures would see the Doctor and companions face off against Dogbolter. I believe in issue 500 of Doctor magazine, they eventually put him away for a bit, with the help of a couple of companions, including Frobisher. So I guess Frobisher being a companion in these audios was a way to open it up to more comic strip and also book companions as well. Actually, I think that was more Bernice Summerfield. But with Frobisher, I think it opens it up for more comic strip companions, and along with Bernice, for more expanded media characters, making a change from books or comic strips to audio, maybe even games in some cases. I'm not sure. I don't think they've done game audio adaptations yet. They've done stage plays. So yes, The Maltese Penguin was an excellent story. It was a fun listen. It was a great detective noir story featuring Frobisher, and it's an amazing story. So I'm going to give this story a 10 out of 10. And before doing this review, this was already given a 10 out of 10, whilst Holy Terror had been a 9. and I just changed my score whilst talking about it. I'd also like to mention before finishing up that Robert Jesek is perfect as Frobisher. He is absolutely perfect as Frobisher, and I also want to mention that Colin Baker does great performances, 2 great performances as the 6th Doctor as well. He's really great. Even in Maltese Penguin, when he turns up a few times, he puts so much effort into so very few scenes. And I think he also does a great job in The Holy Terror as well. Jesek, is, as I've mentioned, is perfect as Frobisher, and I also love Toby Longworth as the voice of Dog Bolter. So, it all turns out well, and like I said, I love the cast of Holy Terror, and I think the cast of this story, as Maltese Penguin, is also really brilliant as well. Bonus thing, if you do get the CD, you get a nice little message from Frobisher on the side of the booklet. So that's really cool. That's great, and I'm glad that the CDs are still in stock, just for that little bit, alongside the fact that you can still get this masterpiece on the CD. So there you go. That's the 2 Frobisher stories reviewed, and you can tell that we love Rob Shearman on this channel. We love Matt, and I think possibly the other John and Ben, I'm not sure. They definitely love his other stories. Chimes Midnight, I will agree, is also a really great story. And of course we all love Dalek. So that's great. I'm not sure, I haven't quite read his books yet, although I do have one of the ones that features a short story from him. So anyway, that's it from my reviews of the Frobisher stories. What did you think of them? What do you think of Frobisher as a character? What do you think of him in the comics? Drop your comments down below. And also, what do you think of Rob Shearman audio stories, of his books and short stories? What do you think of Dalek? Do you think he should come back to write another Doctor Who story, or another audio, or another book? Comments down below and give us your opinions. Anyway, that's it from me. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed Colin Month, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.